Welcome to Spirits Podcast, a boozy dive into mythology, legends, and folklore. Every week we pour a drink and learn about a new story from around the world. I'm Amanda, and you're about to hear from Julia because this is a special, our first ever collaborative crossover episode. We are so excited about this. We had a past and probably future guest, Chelsey of American Hysteria, talk with us about a topic that we thought would interest them. If you remember when Chelsey was on the show, we referenced the game. I don't even know how to describe it. The game that's not really a game where if you think about it, you lose. And Chelsey was like, never heard of this before. And Julia and I were astonished because it is such a huge part of our childhoods. So we went on American Hysteria to do a full deep dive episode all about the game, plus some other like memes from middle and high school that I think you are going to love. We had so much fun, and we really made this an American Hysteria X Spirits collaboration event. The whole episode follows. You are going to love it. If you are already a listener of American Hysteria, we hope you'll love it. We hope you extra love it and listen to it twice on both podcast feeds. And if you are not yet a listener of American Hysteria, I know you are going to love that podcast. So make sure you go over and check it out. You'll get the link in the description. And listen, Chelsey is fabulous. You're going to love their lens on all things urban legends and moral panics. We will be back next week with a brand new episode of Spirits, and in the meantime, enjoy our crossover all about the game with Chelsey Weber-Smith of American Hysteria.
If we are sticking to the strictest form of the rules laid out, we are still all continuously playing the game. And at the end of the day, the real winning is completely forgetting that the game exists. Therefore, I've ruined it for most of your audience.
Julia Shafini and Amanda McLaughlin are the hosts of the podcast Spirits, a history and comedy show focused on mythology, folklore, and urban legends. Each week, they pour a drink, hence the Spirits double entendre, and deep dive into stories similar to the ones we cover here. On this episode, my new friends tell me the history of an early 2000s fad called the game, a big-time phenomenon that somehow completely passed me by. And I do hate to inform you of this, dear listeners, but you have already lost the game. I'm your host, Chelsey Weber-Smith, and this is American Hysteria. I am so excited to welcome our Urban Legends girlies, first time on the show, Amanda and Julia. Thank you for being here.
Our pleasure. It feels like such a welcoming, but we've already gotten to talk to you so much on our own show that I'm like, oh yeah, we're old hat at this point, right?
Oh yeah, old friends.
Long-time listener, first-time guest, thank you so much for having us and for believing us that there is a full episode in this subject. We promise you there is.
Okay, I'm excited. This is one of those episodes where I get to go in knowing almost nothing, which is not where I'm generally comfortable, but it's where I have some of the most fun. So I am excited to jump into this like very strange topic and like very seemingly popular phenomenon that entirely passed me by.
I will say you're not the only one. So this is kind of exciting.
Okay. Well, why don't you take it away? Let's get started.
Yeah. So, Chelsey, I'm about to piss off a lot of your audience by telling them, unfortunately, they just lost the game.
Darn.
Reset the clock.
Reset the clock.
Reset the clock.
Reset the clock.
All right, reset the clock.
So I really wanted to do this because we were talking about urban legends and stuff when you were on Spirits, and I mentioned the game kind of offhandedly as a thing that I had assumed everyone knew about. And then you told us, I have no idea what that is. So I'm very excited to not only give you a deep dive on the game, but also the history of how it began, where it might have grown from, and whether or not we're still playing today.
Ooh, okay. All right.
I'll tell you, I'll be playing till the day I die, Julia, because you and I met in preschool, and very occasionally one of us will say, I just lost the game. And that's going to happen until one or both of us shuffles off this mortal coil.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes, right on the deathbed. Last words.
Oh my God. Wait, I didn't even think about putting it on a tombstone.
Oh,
okay.
no.
Already I have to rein myself in.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right. Rewind.
So for your audience who might not know what I'm talking about, for you, Chelsey, as a reminder, the game is essentially a mind game where the point of the game is to not think about the game. And to think about the game, it means you lose the game. So there are 3 rules to the game. They're pretty simple, I would say. Number 1 is everyone is playing the game. Sometimes it is specified as everybody in the world who knows about the game is playing the game, but sometimes it's just everyone is playing the game.
Okay.
You also cannot refuse to play the game. You are always playing the game. You can never stop playing the game.
Okay.
Exactly. There's no opting out.
Yes.
It is a little creepy. I like it. Yeah.
Rule number 2 is whenever you think about the game, you have lost the game. Now, by losing the game, that doesn't disqualify you from playing. That is not the end of the game. It's just you've lost and you continue on.
Okay.
Now, rule number 3 is losses must be announced with the phrase, I just lost the game. And in my experience, this was done verbally, but as social media became popular, and that's a very important part of this story about the game, is social media becoming extremely popular. As social media became more popular, especially like during our high school career, posting on social media that you lost the game became more and more prevalent.
Okay.
But basically, the point of the game is to make other people lose the game.
Yes. I'm getting that. I'm picking up on that.
Gotcha. So I learned about the game in high school. I want to say it was probably freshman year of high school, which means it was about 2006. Amanda, do you remember the first time you heard about the game or remember starting to play the game?
Yes, my next younger sibling learned about it when we were both in elementary school. We're about 18 months apart in our birth order. So anytime they learned something before I learned it, since I was older, it was a huge deal. So we learned it in elementary school, but firmly by middle school. By the time it was, 2004, and we were in, 7th, 8th grade, that was firmly the game territory where someone would just say it randomly in the middle of math class and everyone goes, ugh.
Yeah. And it's interesting because in my mind, it was something that everyone I knew also knew about. Like Amanda just said, you would say in the middle of the group, I just lost the game. Everyone would groan, say it as well. And then you would move on. Okay. And I wanted to confirm my biases a little bit in terms of the timeline of things. So this morning, as I was kind of putting the finish on the research, I texted my husband. I was like, hey, baby, when did you hear about the game for the first time? And he simply didn't know what I was talking about.
Wow.
Which is wild to me because we are high school sweethearts. We went to the same high school and middle school. There is no reason that he shouldn't know about the game, but he doesn't.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes.
Is your husband older?
No, we're the same age.
Interesting. Okay, because I graduated in 2006, so I'm a little bit older, and I'm wondering if it was one of those things that I was just a little bit too old, or if I was just doing something completely different with my life that wouldn't have exposed me to the game. But it just seems weird. It just seems like maybe it wasn't a West Coast thing. Were you all on the West Coast, or
No,
where were you?
We're both on Long Island.
Okay, and maybe that comes into play.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
And I did text 2 of my other friends who also grew up on Long Island, but were in different schools, slightly different age ranges. One friend slightly older than me, he remembers hearing it in 7th grade around 2003, 2004. Another one of my friends who's slightly younger remembers hearing about it in 2005 when she was in 5th grade.
Okay. And this does feel very late elementary school, middle school, fodder for fun. It just feels like that's the right age to get involved in something like the game.
Yeah. And it's so interesting, too, because in doing the research for this, I've listened to a couple of different people recounting their experiences with the game and stuff like that. And the first one I listened to, the guy was like, yeah, I first heard about the game in college. And I'm like, what? How?
Okay.
That seems wild,
Yeah. Okay.
But interestingly, the person who said they first heard about it in college heard about it while they were traveling through the UK, backpacking through Europe during their their college career. And that is going to become important later.
Okay.
Ooh.
And what year was that?
I think it's all, so most of the appearances of the game are going to become popularized in the early to mid aughts.
Okay.
And then it becomes viral around the late aughts to early 2010s.
Ooh, okay. All right.
So this is really interesting. I think that this is something that existed in not pre-internet times, but before internet became a like monoculture.
Sure.
You know, before social media was the focus of the internet rather than like funky little websites.
Yeah, we're like in AOL Instant Messenger era. That's our
Yes.
social media.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes. We're like the beginning of MySpace and then towards the end of MySpace going into the Facebook era is kind of like the timeline we're looking at here for the game.
Right. Got it.
And Chelsey, as one millennial micro-generation younger than you, Julia and I were having slightly inappropriate role play chats, not with each other, but with other people on Neopets. So that's what we were doing with our internet connection.
Yes, correct.
I couldn't even tell you what a Neopet really is.
That's fair. That's fair.
It doesn't matter. They were simply chat forums.
And I need to stress to you that we're only 4 years apart. You know, that's the wild part.
It is wild. I know.
Yeah.
I know. Things move fast these days.
Yeah. So the peak of the game, again, late aughts, early 2010s, particularly it's as this more like centralized social media platforms become more popular. Talking the late stage MySpaces into Facebook, and then the height of Facebook groups in particular is kind of when the game became extremely prevalent. Also like YouTube as a growing platform. Important to kind of know what the internet landscape was at the time.
All right.
And this is kind of when we started seeing like the beginnings of virality on the internet, like the viral video, the viral post, the growth of the internet meme. This is the peak ecosystem that the game is developing in. And so the game is a great example of how quickly something could spread and gain traction, not only from word of mouth, but also on the internet. So a lot of us were hearing about the game either through social media networks, or as I like to refer to them and have seen it online referred to as the network of cousins.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
This is what we're talking about when we're like, everyone in the United States knew about the Marilyn Manson rib story.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And it is cousins calling across the country. You're like,
Exactly.
well, it appeared here. How it just must have popped up in some sociological phenomenon, which I agree with in some ways, but I think the cousin theory is usually the real answer.
That's so cute, because I was like, what are you going to do? Go to camp? Like, I didn't go to sleepaway camp.
That's
I
what I'm
didn't have camp
saying.
friends. Like, when did I talk to somebody from California? Like, not until YouTube, not until the internet.
Yeah.
So true.
But your network of cousins might have gone to camp,
Yes.
and those camp kids came from all across the country, and then you have a real parent trap situation going on.
Julia, my cousin who was older and in AmeriCorps and stationed in New Orleans, that's the cousin who had all kinds of new curse words. And I was like,
Of
I haven't even
course.
heard of these. And then I realized they're French.
That makes sense.
So
that
cool.
checks out.
So cool.
So one of the reasons that the game becomes so popular is because of this website called losethegame.com that was run by a man from Cornwall named Jonty Haywood.
It's giving pseudonym.
And Cornwall, England.
Cornwall, England. Yes.
Okay.
So Haywood claims that he first heard about the game in 2001 in Cornwall, though there have been claims by a man in London who said that he invented the game in 1996 with the aim, quote, of annoying as many people as possible.
A valiant thing to do.
Valiant effort, for sure, for sure. So the first reference that we can find on the internet about the game dates back to 2002. But again, because of how like decentralized the internet was back at that time, it didn't really reach its virality until those like late aughts, early 2000s. And people were being, as they often are with such memes, kind of weird and wild about it. There's a 4chan thing that happened where they managed to get like the Times top 30 people to spell out something and then the game.
Whoa.
With like as an acrostic, you know, where they're like in order. They were like, oh, it's this word and then and the game, which is extremely funny.
Wow. Yeah, that's impressive.
That was in 2009, I believe. And then also in 2009, a Belfast man won a contest that was hosted by Cadbury, like the chocolate company, Cadbury Eggs.
Oh, I love Cadbury eggs. My favorite candy in the world.
I'm a big Cadbury egg fan.
Yes.
You know, I love a cream egg. I'm not a caramel egg girly, but I love the cream egg.
No, absolutely not.
That forbidden oval. I love them. Oh, that's Kinder eggs, right?
Yes. But also,
Cadbury's okay.
Yeah.
You want the little toy. That's what you want.
So this man from Belfast, he wins this contest, and the prize for winning the contest was he got to put a message of his choice on 2 billboards in the city.
Whoa.
Dangerous. We would never do that today. Brands have learned, guys. we are the equivalent of like the youngest of 6 kids, where by the time we get there, the parents are like, I know every trick in the book, and maybe I don't care, but like I know them.
Not going to work on me. So he, of course, chose them to both say, you just lost the game.
Wow. Cool.
Incredibly cool. So losethegame.com, still active, by the way.
Wow.
And as of the day of this recording, it lists 5,442,325 people as being, in the website's words, infected, quote unquote. And also it shows a map as to like where players are located, which I assume is based on like tracking site visits.
Sure. Yeah.
And it isn't like necessarily that like, oh, the game has kind of died off since the early 2010s and the mid-aughts. On TikTok, RIP to TikTok as of, the time this episode comes out probably. Especially during the COVID lockdowns, the virality of the game saw an uptick. It became a trending meme to either tell your audience that they had just lost the game or to announce in a video that you yourself had lost the game, thus making everyone else lose who watched the video.
So COVID entertainment was going on shitty little walks and playing the game and bird watching.
Yep.
This is what I feel like everyone got into. Okay.
And trying unsuccessfully to like gather friends to do some kind of Zoom game night.
Totally. And watching Love is Blind as a collective nation. Yeah.
Yes. We all got really into Tiger King and Queen's Gambit. You know.
That's all we had. Yep.
That's all we had. And the game. We also had the game.
So, Chelsey, as someone who wasn't exposed to the game and quote unquote infected with having lost it or having played it, does this strike you as fun? Like what are your initial reactions to the game and all it entails?
It does not strike me as fun, mainly because I don't know how I like a game with a strategy. I guess the strategy is to make people lose. So that part is fun. But I don't know how you win while actively playing it to make others lose. That feels like there's no possible way to do both of those things. So I don't know how to play the game, really.
That's a very interesting thought process about it. And I want to come back to that as we sort of dive deeper into where the game came from, because I listened to a couple of interviews regarding the history of the game, and I think that thought process is very interesting and kind of goes against the original intention of the game.
Okay.
To give us a little bit more background, we're talking about this right now as something that has been like popular from the last like 20 years or so, a little bit longer, maybe like getting closer to 30 years. But this really isn't a new thing, this idea of trying to avoid thinking about a certain thing, right? Like I've always heard of it as the pink elephant paradox,
Right.
which is the idea of like, I think the original quote is from Kurt Siedemack's City in the Sky, which is, quote, tell a man he shouldn't think of a pink elephant and he can't get the beast out of his mind.
Yeah.
So the idea of like, the minute I say, don't think about that, you immediately start thinking about it. It's actually an even older quote from Dostoevsky in 1863.
Oh, Julie, the moment you said that, I said, of course it's Russian. Of course it's Russian.
I know.
Yes. So the original quote is, try to pose for yourself this task, not to think of a polar bear, and you will see that cursed thing will come to mind every minute.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
This is a studied phenomenon called ironic process theory. It's called IPT.
It's got a theory name. I love that.
It does.
Okay.
Basically, it's essentially saying that when an individual intentionally tries to avoid thinking of a certain thought a paradox occurs because the attempted avoidance fails, and it even causes the thought to occur more frequently and more intensely.
Okay.
It was first studied by a man in 1987 named Daniel Wagner, and he took 34 participants, sat them down for 5 minutes, and told them not to think about a white bear, obviously inspired by Dostoevsky. If they did think about the bear, they were told to ring the bell in front of them. And they rang it frequently.
Constantly.
Could participants hear each other's bells?
No, everyone was in separate rooms.
Okay.
Got it.
Good question.
Excellent question. He also ran it with another factor where he was like, okay, don't think about this instead. But it still created the same like feedback loop, essentially. So, and this is kind of what the brilliance of the game is, because much like Wagner's theory, it's this idea of not thinking about a thing actually creates what he calls a rebound effect, in which you think about that thing more than you would have if you simply hadn't been told or reminded about the thing, even when you attempt to suppress the thought.
Oof, yeah. It makes me think of Ghostbusters when he's supposed to not think of the Marshmallow Man and then it becomes a gigantic, insane monster.
You don't tell someone, be like, don't think about anything.
Right.
Immediately they think about not thinking about anything.
Exactly.
Yeah, and this often comes up in bigger discussions about like, letting things fade away, about focusing on things that frustrate you. Do you, integrate them into your life? Do you let it go? About quitting things, sobriety. Like there are so many ways in which this phenomenon is really something humans deal with all the time. Yeah,
and IPT is particularly studied for people with like OCD or compulsive thought disorders or like compulsive eating and stuff like that. Like it is really like a thing that has been pretty studied substantially at this point.
Yeah, that makes sense. I did not make that connection. That's cool.
There you go. But before this was even being studied by someone, before David Wagner sat down and told people don't think about a polar bear, the game might have existed already.
Okay.
Wow. And tell me again the year of this polar bear.
1987 was the David Wagner.
All right.
So we have that claim that I mentioned before of the London man who said that he invented it to annoy everyone in 1996. But we're pretty sure that the game actually predates that. So my question is like, how did it get to us? But like anything, the origins are a little hazy. There's not really a written record of it or anything like that. But we do have this idea that the game might have started as a different mind game that was played by Cambridge students in the mid-1970s.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh.
So,
why was my first reaction? What were they getting up to in the 70s at Cambridge?
Yeah, true. Great question.
So it's actually quite interesting. There's a student society at Cambridge called the Cambridge University Science Fiction Society. There's a bunch of nerds in the 1970s from Cambridge.
Is that the thing where like Wilde and C.S. Lewis and like Tolkien were all smoking the same pipes and stuff?
No, because this one was started in the 1970s.
Ah, shit.
It doesn't have a long tradition like a lot of the other Cambridge societies do. But according to one of the members, the club had kind of been inspired by the rise of punk subculture at the time. And they really wanted to use the like aesthetic and ethos of the movement and specifically like use it as a way of channeling how mathematics were studied and how like game theory was thought about.
Cool.
And so they developed a series of games following that mindset. And one of the games that they began playing was called Finchley Central.
Okay.
Now, for people who either are from like the London area or have visited there before, Finchley Central is the name of one of the tube stations.
Got it.
Now, Finchley Central was a mind game that, again, predated the Science Fiction Society by a few years. It was created at least in 1969, if not before that. But it was outlined for the first time in a publication called Manifold Magazine by Anatoly Beck and David Fowler as part of an article that they titled, and this is one of my favorite article titles I've ever heard, A Pandora's Box of Non-Games.
Ooh.
Sick title.
Fun box to open.
If you'll indulge me, I want to read the introduction to the article about the games. So, quote, "In the study of games, as in many other intellectual pursuits, one of the important problems is to find the question." And that's all in caps.
Sure.
"When the question has been found, the answer may be sought in good time. In game theory, there are simple games like the matrix games and very, very complex games. Today, the center of game theory is occupied by the theory of cooperative games, in which it is not yet known what an answer would be, much less how to find one. We will include below a few simple cooperative games. In addition, we will exhibit some things which are almost certainly games, except that they are so ephemeral, so indistinct that they defy analysis. Unlike chess or Go, where the complexity arises from the multiplicity of possible strategies, the difficulty here arises because of the great simplicity.
Okay.
It's academic in the most way, which is like, what is a poem? What is art? What is a cloud? Like, in real ways that I really jive with. And I love thinking about, like, what is knowledge? What is an answer? What is information? But as soon as you said these are, people with, I'm picturing heavy velvet bell bottoms and long sideburns in the 70s being like, what is a game indeed? It's important. It's also funny.
Yeah.
It's also funny. I just love that. It's so ephemeral, so indistinct.
Yeah, it's very like academic smoking shitty 70s weed vibe to me.
That's the vibe. That's definitely the vibe. So they go on to describe the first game, which of course is Finchley Central. And so this is how they describe how to play Finchley Central. 2 players alternate naming the stations on the London Underground. The first to say Finchley Central wins. It is clear that the best time to say Finchley Central is exactly before your opponent does. Failing that, it is good that he should be considering it. You could, of course, say Finchley Central on your second turn. In that case, your opponent puffs on his cigarette and says, well, shame on you.
Ooh.
That's the end of the game. That's the end of the game description.
Okay. We have some like old sportness, right? Of like a gentleman's game.
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, like, all this being said, the objective is to say Finchley Central when really there is nothing stopping either of you to say it at any point in playing the game, but it's considered bad sportsmanship because saying Finchley Central ends the game.
Wow. Okay. So it's like uncouth to actually win the game.
Yes.
Okay.
Or to win it too soon.
It's like we want to continue going for as long as possible. So to say Finchley Central too early, you're like, oh, you ruined it.
Yeah. Okay.
And I must point out a very live topic in the games community, in games discourse. Julia and I have a Dungeons and Dragons podcast. Shout out, join the party. And constantly on Bluesky right now in 2025, people are debating like, oh, but like it sucks to win at the expense of fun. But like, is it a game if the only point is fun and you're not going to win? Like, this is really a very live thing that has not gone away in 50 years.
Yeah,
yes.
And it makes sense. It's a great question and a great thing to think about because it's absolutely true. It's not fun to win too early.
Yeah. You're like, oh, all that build up for nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But then I guess it becomes like, when do you win the game?
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or I should say Langley.
Finchley.
Finchley Station. Yeah.
Yes.
That does make me want to publish a version of this about DC Metro stops because nobody loves the DC Metro more than the users of the DC
That's
Metro.
true.
And so I feel like that would be very popular.
I think you should do it.
Incredible. There is another version of Finchley Central that has a different name. It was popularized on the BBC radio show I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue, which is the title of the BBC radio show.
Okay.
Oh, the Brits.
It doesn't really differ all that much in the rules other than like the point of the game is to entertain the audience rather than like actually winning the game. So now we're fast forwarding out of 1969. It's the mid 70s again. Finchley Central is the game that is being played by the Cambridge University Science Fiction Society members. But as the group played it more and more, they began to change and evolve the rules, with one member first suggesting that you could win not just by saying Finchley Central first, but by thinking it first.
Ooh. Okay.
And then iterating further, they began to turn the game on its head, saying you actually didn't win, you instead lost by thinking Finchley Central first, therefore losing the game the moment you thought about the winning move of the game.
Okay, so we've moved from smoking weed to taking acid in the Cambridge Society. Okay, all right.
So the thought process is, as like membership kind of grew and people graduated and stuff like that, they passed down this variation of the game to new generations of different members. Okay. But eventually, and they're not sure exactly when, one of the members actually blamed one of the other members, and the guy's like, I don't remember that at all. But it eventually broke containment from the club. Okay. And we assume it transformed into the game. And Chelsey, I want to go back to what you said earlier about you're like, I don't think the game sounds fun, right? Like if you're constantly trying to figure out how to make other people lose, you're not really winning. Like what's the point? And in an interview with one of the like original members of the Science Fiction Society, the American interviewer was like, so like if you win, and the guy's like, no. There's no winning. That's what's funny about the game. That's the point of the game is no one wins. It's only losing.
Yeah.
So I think it is a very like almost weird British wit idea that like there is never any winning. And it's really the American mindset of like, but how do I succeed? How do I win?
Interesting.
You know?
Yeah. Why do I do this if I can't become the best at it?
Exactly.
And become a billionaire. Yeah.
The British punk subculture also makes a lot of sense to me here, because as you're describing it, Julia, I'm like, oh, that's my definition of cool, is not trying, not caring, and just being effortless. And then from the outside, I want and aspire to it so bad, and I can't achieve it definitionally because I care. And so I love that it's like, yeah, whatever. Okay. Like the only winning is not to care. And I'm like, but I care so much.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think that's the big philosophical difference between us.
Yeah.
So part of the transformation from Finchley Central to the game, this is where it becomes the murkiest. We really don't have any sort of written record between the like late 70s to the 1996 man claiming that he invented the game, right? And I think that part of the reason that Finchley Central transformed into the game has to do with it breaking containment, I'd like to call it, and escaping outside of Cambridge and then the greater London area. So again, remember, you lost Finchley Central because you thought of Finchley Central. But Finchley Central doesn't mean much to someone who, let's say, like in the example of Jonty Haywood, for example, is from Cornwall. Or if you're from Ireland, or eventually, as we know, it will eventually get across the pond, in the United States. Like Finchley Central doesn't mean anything for two girls from Long Island. Right. You know what I mean?
Yep.
No, but if you said Penn Station, I'd be like, shit, because I think of train stations and that comes to mind for me very quickly and obviously.
And that's like that's why the game was so centralized at first. But I think it becomes decentralized because you need a way to like make it more universal. Like you're no longer like riding on the tube, you see Finchley Central and you're like, ah, shit, I lost. You need something that is easy to think about in the day-to-day. And that universality is why I think the game becomes the game and why it becomes so popular so quickly and why it spreads so quickly.
Yeah. Yep.
So I think that is like a really interesting way to like see where it came from and how it had to change in order to become this thing that is, according to youlostthegame.com, a worldwide phenomenon.
And I like this kind of a like changing and occurring in the 90s because it almost reminds me of like Scream, the movie, where it's like the movie within the movie, it becomes really meta. Like no longer are you thinking about something outside the game. You can't think of the game, which to me is very 90s.
Yes.
Self-awareness culture. Yeah.
It's very postmodern. It's not just we're playing the game, but we are so, evolved and alert and aware that we can comment on the fact that we know the game. And again, I'm saying it with a little bit of distaste, but a lot of loving it because I love that shit. I read Thomas Pynchon. Like, come on.
Of course. Yeah.
Now, I didn't mean to like admonish you for thinking like, oh, how do I win the game? Like, I didn't want to be like, oh, Chelsey, you have a real American mindset about that kind of thing.
It's okay. You can admonish me.
But that is like a general question that like people have asked, especially as it went from Finchley Central to the game. So the question of how do you win the game? The answer really is you don't, but there are variations of the game rather than it being that kind of never ending, you're constantly doing it until the day you die and Amanda's going to put it on her tombstone style. There are some people who like would say the argument that you are winning the game simply by temporarily forgetting about the game, in which case the victory does feel kind of hollow.
Yeah.
Because you're like, wait, I forgot about the thing. So I was winning that whole time, but I forgot that I was winning.
I can't process that I am winning. So am I really winning? Yeah.
I've also heard that there is a additional alternate rule to the 3 that I listed at the beginning of this episode, in which a winner is, albeit temporarily, achieved. So this additional rule states that when someone declares that they have thought about the game and therefore lost the game, there is a temporary immunity period where other people can think about the game without necessarily losing, which then makes all of the other people around the person who announced that they lost winners.
Okay.
But again, I would say it is considered a controversial rule among the players of the game.
Among the purists, yeah.
Among the purists, yes, for sure. But also, like, there is something to be said about the universal spirit of someone in a classroom saying, I just lost the game, everyone groaning and saying, I just lost the game. You know what I mean?
I do like that, yeah. That was probably very annoying for teachers.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
It must be. Julia, that also reminds me of my knee-jerk reaction to you bringing up social media in the beginning of this episode, which, you know, again, we graduated high school by the time Twitter was kind of mainstreaming, so it wasn't quite as present for us. We certainly had Facebook, not Instagram yet, and Twitter was kind of gaining popularity among the more online of us. But I find it against the spirit of the game to use social media. To me, the point of it is the, like, you know, crossing of just sort of happenstance with people that are around you. And to me, pranking someone, putting it on a billboard, you know, doing anything at scale kind of subverts the fun of it. But maybe that's just like an analog and, you know, unupdated attitude of mine.
Well, that's also really interesting, Amanda, because one of the popular types of videos, I'll say like a video meme perhaps, was like elaborate pranks in order to make someone lose the game.
Okay, that's fun.
The Rick-rolling phenomenon.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to say it's very Rick-roll, yeah.
Doing like a Rube Goldberg sort of machine that like you watch the whole video, it's like 5 minutes long, and then at the end like a scroll unscrolls and it just says you lost the game.
That's funny.
See, I like that. That pisses me off, but that's funny. So maybe
funny.
What I want is effort.
Okay.
Yeah, creativity.
Yeah.
Do you blame the Belfast man who won that contest and decided he's like, I'm going to make everyone lose in Belfast?
You know, no, I admire the cheek. So this is good. I'm unpacking a lot of contradictions in myself. Yeah,
That's good.
There we go. That's good.
I like that.
That's what this show's for. Yeah.
So we've kind of made allusions to the fact that the game goes on forever until we all die in the heat death of the universe. Not necessarily true. There were a couple of supposed proposed endings, right?
Okay.
So one of the most prevalent ones that I've seen is that the game will end when the Prime Minister of the UK announces, on TV, mind you, that the game is up.
Wow. Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
And honestly, we haven't had a true millennial as Prime Minister yet in the UK, I don't think.
Oh, God. I just remember that millennials would be president one day. Oh, boy. Okay.
It's too much pressure.
But when we do, they have the opportunity to do something very funny.
Uh-huh.
A couple of other ones from early sources said that if the Queen of England announced it, the game would end.
She'll never do it.
Well, she can't now.
She can't now.
Also, if the Pope announced it, that's another option.
I could see him doing it.
I was going to say Pope Francis would be the Pope to do it.
Yeah.
Pope Francis would be like, this is causing discord among our youth. Like, let's get this over with. I'm going to say it in Spanish, then Latin, then English. It's over.
The Catholic Church is just bleeding members. We need to bring in the youth any way we can.
I think if Pope Francis had been Pope in 2009, he would have done this.
He might have done it. Yeah, he was very online.
Instead of that vampire we had.
Benedict, yeah.
Yeah, Benedict the 14th, I think.
Yeah. Scary.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then there was also one last one because, you know, the internet, it's the late 2000s, it's the early 2010s. Everyone was obsessed with Chuck Norris. So they said only Chuck Norris could end the game.
Yeah. That wasn't like our finest time in millennial culture, the Chuck Norris era.
No, not really.
No, I feel like that coincided with, or maybe was on the tail end of the bacon era.
Oh, yeah.
Which I know is partially, from the pork lobby to like make us buy otherwise undesirable pork products to like white Americans, like pork belly.
Mm-hmm.
But I just had a image of Chuck Norris like karate chopping through a piece of slab bacon, and on the slab bacon is written, or perhaps tattooed, "I just lost the game."
Wow.
Perfect. And he's got a little finger mustache tattoo.
Of course, naturally.
More after this.
Hey everybody, it's Amanda. Welcome to The Refill. So glad you're here. And hey, if you came over from American Hysteria, we're so glad to have you. Welcome to Spirits, where we call our listeners the conspirators, but in like a fun, queer, cool way, and not the terrible way. Welcome to the part of the show where we tell you about what's going on with us, ads, welcoming our patrons, all the good stuff that you need to know, which, first of all, if you live in Portland, Oregon, you should come see us live on March 23rd. It's going to be so much fun. Julia and I cannot wait to bring you all kinds of Pacific Northwest weirdness. So listen, I know it is a doable drive from Seattle. I know there's some of you in Oregon who want to come through outside the Portland area. So join us. Go to spiritspodcast.com/live to get your tickets now. And by the way, if you are a conspirator who lives in or around New York City, you can also come say hi to me and Julia at a craft cocktail pop-up that we are hosting for Join the Party, the Dungeons & Dragons podcast that we are players on February 20th. That is free to attend. It's in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, right by the Multitude Studio. And if you want, you can buy an incredible cocktail or mocktail by listener Nick. So it's going to be fabulous. Both links in the description. Come through. We would also love to welcome our newest patrons. Thank you so much to Micah, Marissa, and Milo. 3 M's right in a row. If y'all are triplets, then I highly appreciate your coordination in all joining the Patreon in the same 36 hours. So thank you so much. You now have access to things like a monthly extra bonus Urban Legends episode. You get behind the scenes notes and printable recipe cards for both cocktails and mocktails with every dang episode, and many, many more. We have going on 9 years of bonus content on the Patreon that you can get if you join at patreon.com/spiritspodcast. And thank you especially to our supporting producer level patrons: Alicia, Ann, Hannah, Jane, Lily, Matthew, Rico Lake, Captain Jonathan, Malachi, Cosmos, Scott, Will, and as well as our legend level patrons: Audra, Bex, Chibi Yokai, Michael, Morgan H, Sarah, and BMEF Scotty. Now, this week, I typically recommend here like a book or song or game or something I've been enjoying. I'm going to recommend you subscribe to American Hysteria. If, as a Spirits listener, you have not yet listened to the show, I have a great news for you, which is it's awesome. You're going to love what Chelsey does with the show. They edit so well. They're such a good performer and speaker. All the topics are stuff that you are going to love. So go on over, subscribe to American Hysteria. And hey, by the way, if you like this episode, it would be super helpful to us if you would text a friend about it. If you have craved a Spirits Julia research deep dive into a topic that's more around contemporary urban legends and folkloric practices, this is a really great starting point. So text a friend, say, hey, listen to this episode. You're going to love it. Remember the game? If you haven't, now you will. And text them that link. By the way, as always, we have transcripts for all episodes at spiritspodcast.com about 48 hours after the episode comes out. And hey, tons going on over at Multitude, the podcast collective that we are a founding member of. And let me tell you a little bit about the newest show to join us. It's called Tiny Matters. It is co-hosted by scientists Sam Jones and Deboki Chakravarty, and it is all about genes, microbes, and other tiny things that have a big impact on our world. Deboki and Sam take apart complex and sometimes contentious topics in science to rebuild your understanding. They post fabulous reels on social media, and they cover everything from deadly diseases to ancient sewers to forensic toxicology. You are going to love learning about the messiness and reality of science in the past, present, and future. So go on over, subscribe to Tiny Matters in your podcast app, or check out Tiny Matters online at the link in the description.
Hi, my name is Brian Lauder, and I'm one of the hosts of Outward, Slate's LGBTQ podcast, where we lead a whip-smart queer salon each week with guests like Raquel Willis and Bob the Drag Queen. It's the inclusive space that we deserve. You'll hear discussions on topics like the lesbian subtext in True Detective and how trademark law is helping queer brands reclaim derogatory language. Join us for conversations on queer culture and politics each week, and follow Outward now wherever you listen.
And now, back to the show.
So my final point is there has been an argument that the game has already ended. So in a 2008 webcomic from XKCD, you are probably familiar with the art, if not the webcomic itself, in a single, very simple panel titled Anti-Mind Virus, it just reads, "You have won the game. It's okay. You're free."
Wow.
I'm going to share it real quick with you guys just so you can see it. But it is hilarious.
Wow.
Wow. Just simple.
Just really simple. Yep. I love that.
They're like, be free, friends. Be free
I'm
from
sure
the
it
game.
didn't work. Yeah.
Yes.
Classic XKCD from that era as well. That's like the homepage of the internet in many households in, the aughts and early 2010s.
Yeah, for sure. Was this like a Tumblr thing?
Yeah, I would say Tumblr definitely liked the game.
Okay.
Tumblr was very into the game at the time. I'm sure if you search Tumblr still, you'd still find posts about the game.
Yeah, I've been admonished quite a few times by people being like, you missed something that happened on Tumblr in your research or your presentation or your conversation. And it really is just like, entirely missed by me. I don't know if it was age or just I wasn't such an internet person until later on.
You know what the thing is with Tumblr as well is like you had to be there because no one was writing about what was going on Tumblr outside of Tumblr.
That makes sense.
It's almost like we're talking about like what this science fiction society in Cambridge was doing. No one was writing down the shit that they were doing at the pub on like Tuesdays,
Right.
Until they did. Yeah.
And while we can go back to what was going on in 2008 Tumblr, it's hard to research,
Sure.
It's hard to find it.
It is. I agree. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. You weren't there, Chelsey. You weren't there. You weren't on the front lines. So all this to say is if we are sticking to the strictest form of the rules laid out for the game, we are still all continuously playing the game. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, the real winning is kind of completely forgetting that the game exists. So therefore I've ruined it for most of your audience. But when I texted my husband and he told me he had no idea what I was talking about, there was this like moment of like clarity, a moment of like, like the angels opened up where I was like, damn, did he really permanently just win the game? Did my husband permanently win the game? And I like to think that he did. And he won't remember that I told him what the game was and forever will be the winner and the champion.
Well, bless his heart.
Bless his heart. He tried so hard. Now, I love the game because I think that it is such an excellent example of something that we often talk about on Spirits regarding urban legends, something that you talk about on your show all the time. But this idea of like the word of mouth network, going back to the network of cousins, all of these things that kids in the 80s and the 90s and the early aughts all knew about before the internet was really a thing. And Amanda, I know you did a little research on some fun options and fun examples of like other stuff besides the game that somehow we all knew about in 2003,
Absolutely. And I would love to run through a list of the ones that I found most interesting and see what made it to the West Coast, what made it for us, and what perhaps the listeners of this podcast grew up with that to them is like, oh my God, you haven't heard of whatever? Like, whose cousins are you?
Yeah.
Whose cousins are you is such an insult. I like that.
Yeah. Whose cousin is that? Yeah, exactly.
I've always wanted to have a band called Cool Cousin from California.
Oh, that's a great one.
Thank you.
I think that's also a strong candidate for my gender.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Cool Cousin from California is a good gender description,
It is
I will say.
Peak gender, yeah.
Yeah. So growing up in school, Chelsey, give me a quick yes or no. Did you have the MASH game with a fortune teller?
Oh, yeah, of course. Constant, never-ending game of MASH, yeah.
Yeah. And this is you are going to figure out who you're going to marry, how many kids you're going to have, where you're going to live, what your career is like. There's different variations from all over the world going back many, many decades with and without the sort of like fortune catcher. You can also do it in a like grid, essentially with pencil and paper.
That was more what we did.
I've also seen a spiral.
Yeah, we did more of the spiral for MASH. Like I think of MASH as that, and then I think of the fortune teller. I don't remember what we wrote on the fortune teller. Maybe it was just a variation of that, but I was always making those fortune tellers.
It was about like what your future is going to be, and there's some random chance of figuring it out.
Yeah, and you wrote like boy names from your class. And it was a big secret. Yeah, okay.
Yes, exactly. There are all kinds of clapping games. I put into Google Miss Mary Mac, and there are so many threads on Reddit and elsewhere. I did a deep dive in the Gen X culture subreddit. Ooh. That's a scary place, where you were doing all kinds of clapping games, having different rhymes. Some of them quite dark, some of them a little bit raunchy, some of them clearly like Victorian in origin. Which ones were popular with you growing up?
Definitely Miss Susie had a steamboat. Steamboat had a bell. Yeah, I remember this one. That one was pretty inappropriate at times.
Yes.
She was wearing a 40-acre bra is something I remember, which was really odd.
I don't remember that one as one of the originals for us doing it, at least. So that's very cool.
But you had that rhyme structure of Miss Susie had a steamboat. Okay. Really, really random. That would be another fun episode to figure that shit out.
That would be cool.
We had Quackdiddlioso. Do you remember this game?
I don't think I've ever heard of that one.
This was so fun. It was everybody stood in a circle and like hand over hand, not holding hands, but like flat hand on flat hand. And then you'd clap their hand and they'd clap the next hand in a circle.
Yes.
And you would sing this little song. And then when you got to the end of the song, you go 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the goal, if you were the slapper on 4, would be to hit the person's hand. And then the goal, if you were about to get slapped, is to move your hand away. And if you get slapped, you're out, get smaller and smaller. It's a very fun game. Played it a lot.
It's like musical chairs, but also the hand slapping game where someone places their hand over the other and the goal is to hit the person's hand.
Yeah, totally similar, just with like a little song and you could do it with a bunch of people.
That's fascinating.
Which isn't the same, it's not quite the same thing as what we're talking about with like kind of these patty cake like games. But but yeah, those were really the two most popular clapping games or like long time rhyme games where you have to remember the whole big long rhyme.
Yes,
exactly. And there are jump rope and double touch rhymes, like all kinds of things that you can do just rhrithmically to a routine. There's also just what I called like excuses to touch each other, which I don't mean it like that, but what I do mean is like the crack an egg on your head and run eggs down your back, the shivers, just like all of them had little songs, and to me excuses to figure out our boundaries as we're, like having platonic intimacy with other friends.
Yeah.
Light as a feather, stiff as a board, that kind of thing.
Especially important if you're a little queer kid who gets to hang out with their friends and
yes.
Yeah.
Like sleepover sounds dangerous, but I'm in. Yeah. And then there are all of the things that cross over with satanic panic and other kinds of moral panics where we have our parents thinking that emoticons, like ASC2 emoticons, before we had emoji, for anyone who's younger, we had to use things like, the equal sign, the dash, parentheses, brackets, colons to make faces. And people really thought that emoticons were codes to buy drugs. And of course, really for Julia's and my particular era, that text speak, chat speak, leet speak, and other kinds of texting abbreviations. I just remember so vividly, like charts on the local news, ABC7 Eyewitness, of like what your kid needs when they're setting up a sex rendezvous with like the you home, want to go to third base, tonight text.
Yeah. Which like we make fun of all the time still on the internet. Like it's so frequently that you're like, is your child like texting about, and then someone will replace it with like Lord of the Rings, something like that.
Yeah. And then they like would make up all of the abbreviations and what they actually meant.
Like LOL means not laughing out loud, something very silly.
My grandma uses it for lots of love.
Yeah. But I mean, people like they would take it and make it like the most lurid, gross thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, stop doing this.
No
adults.
12-year-old is thinking this. Like, this is before we could access porn that easy too.
Yeah.
Like we didn't know about this stuff.
Yeah, sounds like an adult problem. Yeah, really weird.
Seriously. I wish I knew that retort when I was young. But the chat speak, lead speak led me down a beautiful rabbit hole of written codes that freaked parents out. There are some in different languages. So in Japanese, there's the heno heno moheji, which is a face drawn by Japanese school children using hiragana characters in the Edo period. This shit is old. Let me send this link to you right now.
All right.
Look at him.
Oh, he's
Look at that little
not
guy.
scary.
So these are 7 hiragana characters, and the first 2 are the eyebrows and the eyes, etc. And it usually symbolizes like a sort of just a person's face, like the equivalent of like a stick figure. Like this is an Edo period, just like stick figure guy that you make out of letters.
Right.
And then it's still like used as graffiti today, which is kind of really cool. I love that.
Oh, you'll see it all over. This, in turn, led me to a French version, tête à toto, which is a math equation. Now, I don't know why the French went in specifically a math direction, but you know this is a real meme because there are all kinds of variations.
I like this one.
So this also has a rhyme. So you draw this, you're basically adding together zeros and then you make it in a bigger 0 with an equal sign. And it looks kind of like a skull with glasses on and like a weird mouth and mouth and equal sign. But you recite 0 plus 0 egal la tête à toto. 0 plus 0 equals the head of Toto. Toto's head.
Really basic. Yeah, really straightforward.
And so Toto is a figure in France. This is like saying, oh, Johnny Appleseed, like whatever. Like it's a thing you can refer to. Toto is like a person. I don't find it particularly fun, but I think the fact that you can write down different characters of numbers only, of zeros, a plus, and an equal sign, yielding a face is kind of mind-blowing for a kid.
It is.
It's real boobs on a calculator. Let's be honest.
It is very boobs on a calculator. And Julia, just the same era we were learning to write boobs on a calculator and then saying, this is giving me feelings that nobody wants me to unpack. We were also drawing satanic S's on our binders.
Of course.
Yes.
The Stussy S.
Now, Chelsey, what is your descriptor of this S? You know what I'm talking about when I say it.
Yeah, of course. Fuck yeah. It's 3 lines straight up and down, and then 3 lines directly below it. Then you do a little triangle on the top. You do a little triangle on the bottom.
Yep.
Then you cross it, and then you'd mess it up sometimes and you get it backwards and you'd be so mad. And you'd erase it. But I always drew too hard, so it looked like shit after I erased it.
Yeah. I'd scribble.
But it was everywhere. And every single listener of this show, I almost guarantee knows what we're talking about if they are of the millennial generation.
For sure.
Exactly. And this, you said you described it as the Stussy S, right?
Yeah, which I think is a name that was very recently given to it, like upon reflection of like, what were we doing? What was that? There's no academic literature to draw from here.
There is, in fact, some literature to draw from, mostly forum posts and articles, but I did my darndest to do a deep dive on what I call the cool S, what people call the universal S, the Stussy S, or the pointy S.
Okay.
Lots of ways that this drawing, which again is like the drawing itself, you're like, oh, I know what that means. But just the fact of like making lines and then they all connect, like it is pretty cool. And you don't see where it's going. And the first time someone shows you, you're like, my mind has been blown. I am 8.
Yes.
And it's incredible. Now, people did originally think, and the people who think this really think it with full conviction, that this is from the streetwear brand Stussy, which started in California, 1980. And happily, a journalist, Julian Morgans, researched this for a story in Vice in 2016 and talked with someone who worked with the guy, Sean Stussy, in 1985 and was like, hey, people keep saying this. I've been drawing this S my whole life, too. It predates Stussy. It's not about us. The logo looks a little bit like it, so that's why people thought originally, oh, well, maybe it's like the streetwear thing.
I'm looking at it.
Please.
I'm going to compare.
I loved the cool S when I was a kid, only because I have like a solid S in my last name. So I was like, every time I write my last name, I'm going to include the cool S.
I'm sorry, this S does not look like it at all.
I know.
It doesn't look like it at all.
No, because it's like Stussy, like just like the scribble, right?
Yes.
Yeah. No, it doesn't look like it at all. It's bullshit.
Nope.
Okay.
I'm also glad you said that first because I was like, Stussy? I don't know how this is pronounced. So
I also am not certain at all, but that's what popped into my head.
every time inevitably the cool S is mentioned on, again, Reddit, in a comment thread, anywhere on the internet, somebody will say, no, actually, it's for Superman. This is the one I remember hearing the most, which is that people were like, oh, no, that was the original Superman logo. Happily, journalist Julian Morgans also reached out to DC and they said, no, there's no logo that matches this.
Yeah.
It's very pointy. It's not giving like, 1940s like Superman origins. But people, of course, as this is a phenomenon rising in popularity in the 80s and 90s, found a way to tie Satan to it. They, of course, said that it was an S for Satan worship. That's why it was so spiky. That's why it was like revealed over time. It's about how the devil can draw you in, and individual actions that you do. You might not think that taking a hit of weed, for example, Amanda, when she was 14, will lead you down a path to terrible, crippling addiction. But, it will. And so it was really that like, oh, kids are using this to show each other that they love Satan, was because Satan starts with an S.
Yeah, of course.
I also saw several people say, like, back in the day that their school banned the cool S because they thought it was a gang sign. And they were like, oh, well, we can't have the Bloods or the Crips in our schools. And they're like, that has nothing to do with anything about this.
Exactly. Concurrent panics happening there with gangs and Satan.
Exactly, guys. Don't worry. People thought it was a gang sign in LA, the Soldados. And people were like, no, we have signs. Yeah. This is not one of them.
Not one of them.
Do you think we have time to draw that
No,
S?
they sure don't. Other people have speculated that it might have been originally based on the Suzuki logo before that was as common of a brand in the U.S. Again, the Suzuki logo is simply a bit of a modular S. None of this is really like straight up the middle. Styx as well, the band. People were like, oh, maybe related to that. But in most cases, you ask the person, they're like, no, I made a logo. Yeah. Like an S can be drawn differently.
Yeah.
So you might think that that is as far back as things reach, but people get lost in the sauce. And so I have personally seen 3 or 4 different people who claim that they have found the earliest version of the universal or cool S.
Okay.
One is 1897, a book on typography, which has, again, simply a pointy S in it, as we're experimenting with typeface.
Does it look like the S, the cool S?
It does not, but I can send you... Hang on, I have a screenshot of this.
People love claiming shit.
I mean, me too.
Yeah, well, listen. They're like, this is the same thing.
It's what we do as urban legend, as like folklorists, We're just like, maybe it's that. Maybe that's connected.
I just love when people are like, this is the same thing. And you look at it, you're like, there's nothing remotely similar to what you're describing here.
So, Chelsey, that typeface book was uncovered by a wonderful YouTuber, Let Me Know, who published a very widely viewed video in 2020 on the origins of the cool S, which I loved. And that was as far back as they got. But others have uncovered a painting called The Ambassador by Hans Holbein. It is from 1553.
What?
And I just want to get a quick vote here, a quick little poll.
Okay.
Do we think this looks like the cool S?
Okay.
Let's see.
And specifically, we're looking, so this depicts 2 men standing in like academic finery with some like tools and globes between them, a very pretty green backdrop. And then in between the men, they have just like cuntily covered their workbench with like a little tapestry. And next to that man's left hand, there is an S.
I see it. Hold on, I'm trying
to zoom pretty far. Yeah.
What I like about this is it's very clearly a painting of like cross stitch embroidery. So it is modular in the sense that it is made out of squares.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it has too much space in the curves of the S's. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'd say it's an extreme reach to call that the CCS. I love this painting though.
That's a great painting.
The painting's adorable.
1500s paintings are so scary and weird and incredible.
It strikes me as a particularly transmasculine urge to like put on finery and hang out with your boys.
Oh, yeah.
So I would just love to offer that to anyone for whom that resonates. But yeah, this is clearly, Julia, just a needlepoint S.
Yeah.
There is only one connecting bridge. There are no like borders of the middle part of the S, which to me is really necessary. Yeah. And so I thought like, oh, okay, whatever, that's a stretch. But there's an even older stretch, which is a incredible legacy of course, Islamic art. Okay. Specifically in mosaic and tile, where famously you are not able to depict the visage of God. And so you get really fucking creative with patterns. And so I would love to offer you, this is tile work of a mosque from 1356. And that is the actual oldest one I could find.
Okay.
So we're looking here at this border of stylized S's in sort of like relief white tile against a green outside.
Interesting.
This one definitely is hitting closer for me.
Yeah.
It
feels closer for sure.
Yes.
But I still like there's something about the like distinctness of the cool S that it is like so squished together. So it is defined by only the single line that creates the border. You know what I mean?
Everything touches everything else.
Everything touches everything. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Julia, I'm so glad you brought up how the cool S is legally distinct from other S's, because as everything ends in a capitalist hellscape, which I think is the appropriate note to close this episode on, a guy has, in fact, trademarked the Cool S and is selling officially licensed keychains, carabiners of the Cool S, which is a good application of the Cool S, I have to say. Okay. From his patent application, let me send you an image of that.
Is he suing people?
Not yet.
All right.
But he could.
Not yet.
Okay, we'll see.
Amanda, I think I did also see this one. And I think that he said in an interview, he's like, I don't want to sue anyone. I was like, that doesn't mean you won't, though.
I have a little more on him. Yeah, give me just 1 second.
Okay, good. Oh, look at the paperclip.
Yep.
Yes, Julia, excellent. He is, in fact, using an S-shaped paperclip on his U.S. patent for, again, typically a U.S. patent will then display like a very intricate diagram of a cell or a circuit or like a loom. Mm-hmm. And in this case, it is simply an S that's drawn, which is very funny. It's also wider than the S's I remember drawing. I liked a skinny, narrow, tall S.
Yeah, I think I did too. Mm-hmm. Whatever felt the most challenging, kind of.
Yes.
Yeah.
It did. This man is named Mark May. He filed a trademark on the Cool S in 2020. He claims it took years of litigation after buying the patent or the trademark, off of a college student who was trying to use it as a logo for a line of sensitive fabrics for patients in a healthcare setting.
Oh. See, that's kind of nice.
And the student said, okay. And the undisclosed sum was paid for the trademark. So this man now has a business that I don't necessarily want to promote, but the Instagram handle does have the trademark symbol in the name. So like to really make you know that it's trademarked. In theory, he could sue anyone else who says he doesn't want to, but he might. I just thought it was incredibly, again, just poetic in a way that few things can be, that the trademark text reads, the mark consists of geometric S shape made up of incomplete triangles, incomplete squares, and one incomplete quadrilateral in the center of the shape.
Now, Amanda, can I point out the thing that pisses me off the most about this image here?
Yes.
Now, there is a thing there that says first use, and then it's redacted.
Yes.
And I want to know what he's claiming the first use was.
Yeah.
I would also like to know, there are tons of people on Etsy. If you search Cool S on Etsy, you get over 1,000 things, including a t-shirt that says "Too Cool for Satan," using the Cool S as an S in Satan, which I just think is hilarious. My only gripe is that the sizes get more expensive as you go up, which I think is kind of bullshit. But otherwise, I would wear that.
Yeah.
No notes.
That's damn. Damn, dude.
Wow.
So for me, the legend of the Cool S is alive and well. Again, as recently as 2020, there are 45-minute YouTube explainers being posted about it, and as recently as 2023, Vice News ripped off another YouTuber to claim that this is like a brand new investigation, and had a very widely viewed clip on TikTok where people said, "Oh my God, I didn't know other people did this." It's the cousin network's alive and well.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, and of course it all ends in a capitalist hellscape, like you said.
Ain't that just the way?
Yeah. I guess nobody's probably patented the game yet.
You can't. It's a mind game,
Which is beautiful. Yeah.
All we have to do is think about it and we're playing,
It is nice that it's something that can't be monetized in any way.
Can't be taken from us.
Unless you make a t-shirt about it. But that's cute and fun. You can do that. You can make a t-shirt that says you just lost the game. It's fine with me.
I will say the guy who runs losethegame.com has t-shirts available. So you can go to losethegame.com and buy one if you want. He hasn't trademarked it or anything like that,
yes,
but you can get one out in the universe.
We all have to hustle. It's all right. It's not our
We
fault.
all got to do what we got to do. He's just a guy in Cornwall, man.
Oh, man. Wow. Yeah. And the other thing that comes to mind with the game is that there's an aspect of honesty and you have to tell people when you lose. And that's kind of a beautiful thing to me because you're holding yourself accountable to be honest about when you have thought about the game, but then thusly cause someone else to lose when you admit it. So it is a fun paradox. It feels like one day philosophers will look back at this and it will become some sort of, popular paradox or something like that. Yeah.
I'm sure some anthropologist in the far, far flung future is going to be like, and they all thought they were playing a game, but no one knew what the game was.
I think it matters, though. I think if I was writing a late aughts blog post on Jezebel about this situation, I would say something like, we live in a society and our individual actions impact others. And I think there is something very beautiful about, again, for me, really time-stamped to middle school, but the adolescent experience of realizing that your actions affect others, that other people's reactions and actions bring up something in you, that it's fun to be the center of attention, but not too much, and that it can be really fun to be in on a joke, but never good to be the brunt of that joke. And so the game really strikes me as something that is a thing you feel in the know about, a thing that affects you, that cuts across, Julia, social strata of the middle school math classroom. Okay? It doesn't matter if the nerd or the quarterback loses the game, we all lose the game.
Yeah.
And I think there is something pretty beautiful about that.
The great equalizer. Yeah.
We're all playing the game till we die,
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the network of cousins, is that an original term?
I definitely didn't originate that. I've seen it online several times, but I do love it.
It's so good. It's so good. I'm going to definitely metabolize that into the show. So thank you for gifting me that term, because we often talk about it. It's friend of a friend, but I'm always thinking it's more cousin based.
Yeah,
that's really good.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think, the Stussy S or the Cool S is a great example of the way that things mysteriously travel. And, we'll never fully know why, but that's what's so special about being that age is because you're so desperate for an inside joke. You're so desperate for that kind of community and identity. And these games definitely bring that to the playground. And literally. And I think it's the same for urban legends. It's you're telling a story, you're becoming the center of attention for a moment, a safe moment, and then you're kind of allowing that to spread out and other people get the gift of telling that story as well. And in terms of urban legends, we all win. That's what I think.
Yeah,
we do.
We do. Thank you for allowing us to do a deep dive into this. It's something that, in my mind, until you told us on our show, I've never heard of that before. It was so quintessential for my young adulthood.
Yeah.
And the transition from being a child into a teenager, that I was no, I have to do a deep dive on this, because now I need to know why some people didn't experience this and I did. So it was awesome.
And I'm so excited to hear from listeners about what they grew up with, what was absolutely ubiquitous. We had like Bobosky Wattentotten as a hand game. We had like different kinds of crafts that went viral, probably from people's camp friends, about, making beaded lizards or friendship bracelets, which my parents thought was Kabbalah related.
Everyone did the beaded lizard.
Oh, yeah. Love that beaded lizard.
I would rock a beaded lizard right now. So please let us know. Spirits is at Spirits Podcast on all the socials.
Yeah, and please, we'll be posting about this and come comment on Instagram at American Hysteria Podcast and tell us if you remember the game, what you remember. We'd love to hear from you always. It's always fun. So
your comments are all just going to be people going, I lost the game. I lost the game. I lost the game.
And that's okay.
That's all right.
We live in a society, people. We're interconnected.
We live in a society.
We do.
Well, thank you both so much. This has been so fun. And I'm going to be thinking about this a lot and constantly be losing every day of my life.
Yeah, I was going to say, now you're playing the game, Chelsey.
I can't get out.
Now you're playing the game.
Welcome.
Except if that person frees me from Tumblr or wherever they come from. This was American Hysteria. Make sure you listen to Spirits wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to support our show and get more of it, you can head to patreon.com/American Hysteria or subscribe on Apple Plus. Not only will you get ad-free episodes, but you'll also get bonus content, including Hysteria Home Companion, the other podcast I do with our producer Miranda, where we tell you stories related to the topics that we cover and stories that we know that you'll love. So just head to patreon.com/American Hysteria or subscribe on Apple Plus. Another huge way to help us out is to leave us a 5-star review on the app of your choosing. You can also leave us a message on our Urban Legends hotline about a tale that you remember from growing up, and we might just do an entire episode about it. Head to AmericanHysteria.com and leave us a message today. American Hysteria's producer and editor is Miranda Zickler. Our associate producer is Riley Swedelius-Smith, and I'm your host, Chelsey Weber-Smith. Thanks as always for listening, and I hope you have a great week.